This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial, and if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. I still can't do it. I just can't bring myself to part with my SL2, the camera that has served as my daily photographic companion over the past 5 years, for my personal work. From its exceptional build quality and industrial design, reference standard Apo Summicron SL primes, to a menu system better than any other in the industry, save for Hasselblad's, it remains, for me, a tremendous capture tool, a joy in hand, a talisman, an inspiration. But none of that stopped me from ordering a pair of new SL3s less than an hour after we first got our hands on them. One for me, and one for Claudia. Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for 3 Blind Men and an Elephant, and straight up, I know exactly what I'm seeing in Leica's just announced $7,000 SL3, because beyond the fact that we had them in hand and saw the results, beyond the fact that money talks, beyond the fact that we used our own money to also buy both a Q3 and an M11 when each first came out, even beyond the fact that it was my mother's Leica 3A that first got me started in photography more than half a century ago, or that in the end I am clearly and utterly not unbiased when it comes to Leica, Claudia and I were able to spend quality time with a number of the people closest to the project, including product manager Stefan Rau, head of experience, that's software, Nico Köhler, and senior industrial designer David Su, and we were impressed. Hold that thought. Additional videos coming soon. But before we get into any of that, this. We're out here along the East River in New York, scouting locations for our next Streets of New York photography workshop coming up this May 3rd through 6th. It's a wonderful combination of classroom instruction, peer review in a very supportive environment, wonderful people, and getting you out on the streets of the greatest city in the world for the genre. Space is limited. There is an early bird discount up until March 1st. So if you're interested, please hop over to www.3bmep.com/streets24. In the meantime, Claudia and I have some more location scouting to do. Back to the SL3. What is it? It is magnificent. That's what it is. Just like the SL2, only better. Industrial art, all the way down to the software now, not only with a dramatically improved and profoundly useful update to Leica's companion app for it, which makes it a completely new experience, but with a thoroughly reconsidered menu system with new structure. A completely new set of icons, and a new font. Hold that thought. In the end, a delightful and delightfully capable means, in short, of capturing images with those reference standard Apo Summicron SL primes during our all but too brief time in Germany, with images like this. One could argue that the SL3 is a blend of Leica's 2019 SL2 and 2023 Q3, very much like that time in Star Trek Voyager, actually, Season 2, Episode 40, when Tuvok and Neelix merge into a single entity named Tuvix while transporting back to the ship. That is, take everything that Leica has learned and applied to the Q3, from the same best in the business for what we do, full-frame 60-megapixel sensor and fourth-generation Maestro processor, to the excellent for what we do, dramatically improved hybrid phase detection, autofocus, yay, 8K video, and articulating rear screen with a corresponding swap of the 3-button layout to the right side of the rear fascia while maintaining the SL2's IP54 intrusion rating. I mean, you get the idea. Put it all into the company's flagship interchangeable lens system camera with only the subtlest of other changes to the chassis, while retaining the SL2's already outstanding EVF and solid IBIS, where 5 stops means 5 stops, and adding tweaks from a second customizable control dial on the left side of the top plate, which I use for manual ISO, to a lighted push-button on-off switch that I like much better than the previous mechanical switch it replaces. Built-in time code, blah 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 blah. Arguably, most interesting of all, it just might be, and let's give Leica credit for figuring out how to do it, making the whole greater than the sum of its parts by more fully expressing the Gestalt of the company's DNA, that is, das Wesentliche, the essential, in that software I just mentioned. We will get into it. One might thus call the SL3 a manifesto of sorts, a singular declaration that a camera is so much more than its technical bits, but oh, what good bits the SL3 has, so much more than hardware, a commitment from Leica to offer what I like to call the shortest distance between intent and execution, with respect for and based on the perspective of a photographer, not a software engineer. They're very important, and a concomitant ambition to bring joy to the experience. Not only would I agree with you, I mean, of course I would. I just came up with those words myself. But the fact of the matter is that the company had me at Picard, the internal project codename for the SL3, as in, yeah, Jean-Luc Picard, captain of the United Federation Starship Enterprise. How delightful. How whimsical. How appropriate. Next generation. Get it? But more importantly for me, in this era, how profoundly decent, thoughtful, and optimistic. On the other hand, one might conclude that the SL3 is far simpler than all that, merely Leica's version of Sony's A7R5, which, if not nearly as entertaining nor quite on point, does warrant mention. Both are interchangeable lens, full-frame mirrorless system cameras with 60 megapixel sensors bearing, shall we say, more than a passing resemblance to one another. Fair enough, I suppose, although I think this formulation does not do justice to either company. The A7R5, for example, is notably smaller and lighter, has a higher resolution, higher magnification EVF that I really dig, a more fully articulating vari-angle rear screen, a dedicated AI chip for autofocus that does make a difference in the real world that the SL3 does not have, arguably superior IBIS. I didn't have our A7R5 with me, nor the SL3 in hand long enough to check, and has a growing catalog of increasingly phenomenal G-Master and what I now call mid-tier G-Wiz lenses, sometimes less than 1/3 or even 1/4 the price of Leica's, say it with me now, reference standard Apo SLs. Never mind the A7R5 itself, which at $38.99 makes it only a few $100s away from being half the price of the $7,000 SL3. But there is good news in that second part of the sentence for those of us with the budget and are so inclined, because while the SL3 is eye-wateringly expensive for most of us, it is the same price as the SL2. And, do I have this right? I think it's available beginning today. The SL3, meanwhile, has its own advantages. Superior industrial design, build quality, weather sealing, color science, ergos, and end-user software, you'll hear me talk about this a lot, that is next level compared to Sony and everyone else in the full-frame segment, never mind its unassailable heritage that inspires so many of us. And with L-Mount Alliance partners Sigma and Panasonic in particular, now offers customers accessibly priced primes and zooms, the best of which are as good as Sony's best for closing in on half the price of Sony. Think, for example, Sigma's brilliant $850 50 DGDN Art 1.4 or $1,500 70-200 f2.8 DGDN Art versus Sony's also brilliant, but even smaller and lighter, yet $1,300 and $2,800 respectively 51.4 G Master and 70-200 2.8 G Master 2, or Panasonic's Lumix S100 f2.8 macro, by far the smallest, lightest, and most compelling short telephoto macro I have ever had in hand, trouncing at a practical level Sony's excellent 90mm f2.8 macro. Or, back to Sigma, how about this? Their $3,000 500mm f5.6 DGDN OS Sports Super Telephoto Prime, essentially an image quality match in our testing to Sony's breathtaking best I've ever had in hand, $13,000 600mm f4. Of course, you don't have to pay anywhere near that kind of money to find wonderful alternatives. We are very fortunate to live in a new golden era of imaging technology. But you're watching this video and wondering about this camera, so let's move on to the two questions probably most important to you at the moment. How does the SL3 stack up against the SL2? And is it worth it for you to seriously contemplate upgrading to it? You know the answer. You know it depends. It depends on use cases, budget, proclivities. You know the drill. Is the SL3 smaller and lighter than the SL2? Yes. Significantly smaller and lighter? No. 70 grams lighter, 3 millimeters shorter, 5 millimeters narrower, side to side to be precise. Over the course of a day on the street, a Q3 and M11, a Sony a7CR with or without a grip, or an a7R5 are all, dramatically smaller and lighter to carry. Is the SL3's autofocus significantly better than the SL2's? Yes, it is. Does it matter? Well, for those of us who use the SL2 primarily to make it easier to focus manual M-glass via adapter, no, actually it doesn't. Straight up, be happy, stick with your SL2. Except, I'm just going to say it, although those of you who know me may have already heard me say this before, what Leica didn't do for the manual focus fans among us is give us anything in the SL3, or any of their other cameras for that matter, that is remotely comparable to what Nikon has done for manual focus enthusiasts in their ZF. That is, a seamless experience of the autofocusing user interface employed in support of manual focus with brilliant in-viewfinder or rear screen focus confirmation. It is next level, but I suspect that at least one reason for this is because Leica can't. Not a single Leica M lens has the electrical contacts necessary to communicate the data the camera needs in real time to be able to do this. As for those of us who rely on autofocus and are looking for performance in the same league, if perhaps not yet top of the leaderboard as Sony, Canon, and now Nikon, the new autofocus system matters very much. And it is in the same ballpark. It's really good. We didn't have enough time to stress test the pair of SL3s we had in Germany, but I personally had no problem with mine even in low light, where the SL2 would have hunted without resolution. If our Q3 and Lumix S5 IIs are any indication, and of course they are both results of the L² partnership with Panasonic, the autofocus is now competitive with the best out there Although for the moment, I'd still give the nod to our A7R5. And yet, this new autofocus is a big reason why we are investing in the SL3. The Q3 is killer for street work, our jam for those of you who don't know us. And I, for one, intend to bracket the Q3 with an SL3 or go SL3 only when I need to go longer or wider, or when space is extremely limited during travel. And I know we need one camera to do it all, including serious video on location using the same lenses we use with our trio of Panasonic Lumix S5 IIs, which is to say that yes, finally, in my book, the SL3 is good enough at video to be considered a hardcore hybrid camera. So let's move on to video. Beyond the spaghetti bowl full of video specs, it really comes down, once again, to use cases in the real world. Claudia and I recorded 2 videos back-to-back in 4K while we were in Wetzlar. First, a conversation with Stefan Rau, as I mentioned earlier. Really nice guy, by the way, first time I met him. And then with Nico Kuhler, also, as I mentioned earlier, also a really nice guy. And Nico and I first met about 5 years ago with the launch of the M10D. Again, both videos coming soon. I do love the Cine mode on the SL3, also present on the SL2, which among other things offers set it and forget it video shutter speed via shutter angle, which is a surprisingly big deal in my effort to remain in the no futz zone. Interesting how something so small can be so helpful. More to the point for how we roll and how we prioritize. This was a 3-camera shoot, but this time we ran all SL3s simultaneously over the course of an hour or so. Thank you again, Nathan, and Jerome. And yes, there were 2 Nathans, recording merely 8-bit 420. Not only because we had zero need for a higher bit rate that really doesn't do nearly as much as most people assert anyway, but because we controlled the light, augmenting reliably gray skies with a pair of temperature-matched COB LEDs running each through 3-foot softboxes, thus eliminating the need for greater dynamic range from the camera by reducing the dynamic range of the scene before it hit the sensor and getting the color balance right straight out of the gate. And because, for talking head conversations compressed by YouTube, like this, any effort beyond what we did would have been totally unwarranted. And oh yeah, and because I do all of our editing and I don't need or want the processing overhead of all that extra data and rendering. The larger point is that there were no overheating issues of any kind, no autofocus issues at all, no batteries running out. We used my own Apo Summicron SL35 and borrowed an Apo SL50 and an Apo SL90, and to my eye, the image quality across all 3 cameras was staggering and well matched. I really wondered if I should render in full HD, but I decided, okay, I'm going to give you the 4K because that's what I like to watch. All good. Although for 4K video, I actually prefer L-mount Alliance partner Panasonic's S Primes. They're smaller, lighter, much quieter, smoother, and faster to autofocus, and each are somewhere between 1/5 and 1/10 the price of those Apo Summicron SLs. For video, they do the business. Moving on. More comparisons to the SL2 and whether or not the upgrade is worth it. Does the articulating rear screen, tilty only, really make it worth upgrading? For what we do, again, street, yes, as part of the broader set of updates. I now much prefer a simpler, faster, tilty screen over flippy or vari-angle screens. Too much futzing. And for serious video work, at least the way I think about it, a flippy screen actually doesn't make any sense at all. Most of the time, I'll want a much bigger monitor. And if I have to shoot solo on location, monitoring and controlling the camera from the Photos app is superior in every way, beginning with the fact that I can control the camera, never mind see myself from 5 feet away. You have to be a peregrine falcon to use a flippy screen for this kind of scenario. Is the tilting rear screen robust enough? Yes, but I already knew that from using our Q3. Do I really use the tilty screen all that often? Yeah, all the time for street photography now. The Q3 was revelatory for me in that regard. It changed how I shoot. I love that lower vantage point without having knee pain, and I appreciate the smaller radar signature when I want to be less obvious. Vivian Meyer, with her Rolleiflex, has nothing on me now. Well, okay, that's not quite true, but once again, you get the point. Does the fact that the SL3 has lost half a stop of in-body image stabilization rankle me? Not at all. I found the SL3 offers a true 5-stop advantage over the reciprocal rule, something I've learned cannot be said about all manufacturers' IBIS claims, and this allowed me to shoot successfully down to 1/2 second handheld. What about the extra 12.5 megapixels? Do they really matter? For some of us, including me, the answer is yes. Especially when I'm doing urban landscape work and cropping an image in when I need the additional reach. This is the approach I decided upon about 5 years ago when I got the SL2 in the first place, choosing to ride Moore's law via pixels rather than schlep longer, larger, and heavier glass, and I've never looked back. I like to roll this way. But what will matter more to some of us is the newer technology of this sensor paired with the latest Maestro processor. The SL3 now offers an additional stop of dynamic range, a full 15 stops, useful especially outdoors, and is much cleaner at ISO 50,000 than the SL2, in the same ballpark as our 24 megapixel S5 IIs, which in turn are competitive with Leica's SL2S. Should check out the video I did called Life at ISO 50,000. But the higher resolution does play a role in this cleaner look as well for the same object size. Then again, I, for one, don't shoot at ISO 50,000 on the street, and I don't think most of us should ever shoot at ISO 50,000. In fact, I've never shot above ISO 12,800 on the streets of New York, London, Tokyo. I prefer to shoot as close to base ISO as possible. I let my shutter speed go long because that is where the fattest part of the dynamic range curve lies. And it turns out that nighttime is where dynamic range can be surprisingly challenging. What about the Photos app and the new menu system? Are they really all that and a bag of potato chips? Well, the answer is yes. And no, not quite yet. I love that Leica is now clearly and successfully focused on the user experience of their software with the same dedication they've always had to their hardware. And the effort from a cleaner, sparer menu design, which is both easier to read and easier to activate and navigate by touch, to the latest version of Photos, which I've already mentioned, is paying off. The result is beautiful and fast, as in just a few seconds to download an 80 megabyte DNG file via Bluetooth, literally 10 times faster than the previous release. Faster even than that with the cable, now 3 times faster than it used to take. But even better, I found the Bluetooth connectivity utterly reliable from startup to persistence, which finally makes geotagging easy peasy even when the camera is turned off, as long as you keep Photos open on your phone. Which is to say that for the first time in my experience, we have a companion app that lives up to the promise of seamless integration with an iPhone, to which one can only say,
"Yeah, baby!" Yeah.
Although, side note, this does affect battery life, and yes, while the SL3 comes with the same upgraded battery capacity as the Q3, it is not nearly the step function improvement we saw when Sony moved to their Z battery a few years ago. When it comes to the menu system, however, I think it's fair to say that ambition and aesthetics aside, beautiful, it's still a work in progress. Yes, the data displays in the EVF and rear screen now auto-rotate from landscape to portrait and back, as some other camera manufacturers' systems already do. It's definitely a nice to have, so yay. And as I've already said, I like the cleaner, more spacious layout. It's not just pleasing to the eye, but it also bears repeating that it is now easier to use the touch interface, which is a more complete implementation, simply a more enjoyable experience. But I'd say that the organization of the menu needs to catch up to the aesthetics of it. And I do have no doubt it will only improve as feedback begins to roll in from the field once the production cameras start shipping, but I am not going to get into that here because that's actually quite a long discussion. But that's okay. Teething pains are part and parcel of every new product launch, and I am confident of where the company will end up. I do think the most valuable and constructive feedback I can offer the team at Leica about the menu system is actually to remember what was great about the film era truly. I mean, what makes film cameras so easy to use even now is A, the very, very small number of options available to you. I mean, after you've loaded the film, you set ISO, you focus, you dial in the exposure by turning the aperture ring on the lens and or the shutter dial on top of the camera. You trip the shutter from only one place, you wind the film to the next frame, and then save for rewinding the film or loading another roll or setting the ISO all over again. You simply rinse and repeat until you run out of film. And B, each function is so very physically separate with such physically distinct controls that muscle memory is locked down almost immediately. Muscle memory in software, well, that's just not a thing. Yeah, actually it is a thing in editing on a computer, say, with keyboard shortcuts, but once more with feeling, you get the idea, not on a camera. Even when we know, for example, the single panel starting menu on so many cameras, we still have to scan it before seeing the parameter we want to change. And if we've been away from the camera for pretty much any length of time, pretty much any camera on the market, most of us will have to reacquaint ourselves with many, if not most or all, of what's what where. No modern camera, including the SL3, is remotely as easy to use as a film camera. Although, of course not. Modern cameras are so much more capable, which is the reason why Steve Jobs famously said of designing computers, "Doing simple is hard." But I think it does make sense to keep these fundamental truths in mind, working toward making the handling, the secondary controls and default settings of modern mirrorless cameras as simple as film cameras as is feasible, while not slavishly copying ergonomics that worked in one era but don't make nearly as much sense today. Like shutter speed dials so stiff or awkwardly located that they require thumb and forefinger for manipulation. Let me wrap it up this way for now. I started with the SL2. I said it's been the most versatile, satisfying, and inspiring camera I've ever owned, yet the SL3 arrives precisely at the moment when my work has evolved to a point that I now often require more than it can provide. The SL3 delivers so compellingly in the real world that, as I said at the outset, we've ordered two, knowing full well that the first iteration of any new, well, anything really, will require fine-tuning. But we're fine with that because straight out of the box, the SL3 is, in my estimation, a significant improvement, making a notable difference in our day-to-day work. This decision is made even easier by the dramatic growth in the L-mount alliance since its announcement back in 2018, the best lenses from Sigma especially, achieving parity with the best lenses from Sony, Nikon, and Canon, yet much more keenly priced. The best cameras from Panasonic in particular, their S5 II series, achieving near or actual parity, sometimes exceeding it in the true or balanced hybrid space with what I regard as the leader there, Sony. In fact, our daily driver is no longer an A7 IV, but an S5 II. The thing about the SL3 is that Leica has pulled off a hat trick with it. First, with the SL3, Leica has dramatically narrowed the technological gap between the once every 4 or 5 year life cycle of its flagship SL system and the every year, often multiple times a year, life cycle of the combined Sony Alpha 7 and 9 series. Second, Leica does so at a propitious moment, I think, when the rate of significant, meaningful technological innovation for most of us has slowed. I think Leica not only understood this, but planned for it, widening the gap between its cameras and those of the rest of the industry with a clear commitment to rethinking and investing in the joy of, the experience of photography and the role software plays in it. Hardware and software should not be distinct. They should be a gestalt, kind of like Apple. Third, Leica achieved this without raising the price. Yet, the one place Leica has not been able to significantly narrow the gap is its size and weight. The SL3 far closer to Nikon's Z8 or even the Z9 when adding the new battery grip for the SL3, which is beautiful. For small size and lightweight within the Leica world, one needs to turn either to their brilliant but far more limited non-interchangeable lens Q3, same basic 60 megapixel sensor, or to the iconic, interchangeable but manual focus only M11, its evolution currently gated by impeccable stewardship to this point, facing ever more persistent existential questions over how much technology can or should be crammed into its iconic form factor, and whether or not it makes sense or is even possible to make the significant investment required not for a next generation, but instead an entirely new generation of tiny, lightweight, uber-performant autofocusing lenses for it. Answers to these questions are all the more challenging because the industry has hardly stood still. Whether we're talking about Fujifilm's APS-C and medium format systems, Panasonic's Micro Four Thirds and full frame systems, Sony, Nikon, and Canon's newest full frame systems, some of Canon's full frame systems, or Hasselblad's medium format X2D, which has the best color science in the business, the best menu in the business. All of which is to say, as I close this out for now, that for SL system fans, the SL3 delivers big time, figuratively and literally. It is an utterly unique, inspiring, and expensive apex camera in its segment with the next generation thinking for the entire industry. Yet, what strikes me most, perhaps the most important takeaway of all, is that with something as simple as its code name, Picard, and more tangibly its new emphasis on and demonstrable success with software as part of an integrated whole, Leica has reaffirmed, at least I see it this way, the optimism and humanity of the company, which I hold in the highest regard, and indeed made manifest these characteristics by positioning itself for the next generation of people, photographers and filmmakers alike. Not that I'm biased or anything, or that I wouldn't love an M-sized Leica with all the mod cons of this SL3. Just saying. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics, and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 6 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, join the conversation in the comment section below because this is an exceptional audience. If you'd like help with a portfolio review, gear selection, finding or honing your artistic voice, sign up for a one-on-one mentoring video call via Zoom at 3bmep.com/booking. Finally, please consider supporting our work by using the no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, sending us coffee money via PayPal, or most especially, joining us on Patreon, links down below as well. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.